say when a baby is born, so is a mother. But while you are there to help your baby grow into the person he or she is meant to be, who is there to help you? Many women feel lost and alone when they become mothers, wondering, who am I now? Sometimes it feels like the transformation from woman to mother is as radical as a caterpillar's transformation into a butterfly. Did you know that inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar literally turns into goop before it rearranges itself into a butterfly? This podcast is about the goop, what soul transformation looks like as you transition from being a woman to a mom, and all the transformations that continue to inform our motherhood experience. Your child's growth matters, but yours does too. I'm your host, Brittany Ming. Welcome to the Motherhood Metamorphosis. Welcome to this episode of Motherhood Metamorphosis. I'm your host, Brittany Ming, and today we're talking to Kris Ann Valdez. Kris Ann is a proud Arizona native with a husband, 3 spunky children, and an overzealous family dog. They live in Phoenix, Arizona, where Kris Ann hoards loose-leaf tea and books. As a freelancer, she writes for Success Magazine and other publications, while her creative writing includes novels, short stories, and children's books. So welcome, Kris Ann. Thanks for coming on today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we are connected through a shared publication, which is Her View from Home. And I was looking for guests, and you emailed me and said that you had written an article called What Georgia O Keefe Taught Me About Being a Creative Mom. And that just really spoke to me because I am a creative person myself, but I struggle with how to fit in my creativity in my everyday life, or feeling guilty about spending too much time on my creative life, or feeling guilty about not spending any time on my creative life. So I wondered if you could just tell us the story of that article and why that was a special point of emphasis in your heart and life.
Yes, I followed Motherwell for some time and I love their work. As a mother, I just feel like they always have really great conversations on their blog. And so I had emailed them something I wrote, and they had written me back and said they liked my writing, but that it wasn't right for them. And so I put the idea aside, and then I was attending a literary conference with a friend. We had done a project together some years ago, and we were actually invited out to give a book talk about writing children's stories. And so I flew out to Colorado with my son, who was like 6 months at the time. And he came with us to the conference. And I was so nervous because I was supposed to give this talk and I had a baby in tow. So as a mother, I think you come up with all the worst case scenarios. Like, what if he has a blowout when I'm presenting, or he starts crying and I can't get him to stop? Or so, you play all those ideas out in your head. But the talk ended up going well, but he was at the conference all weekend. And what I was so nervous about was that he would be an interruption. Instead, all of these conference attendees were like baby hungry and holding him and taking him. And it was really lovely to see how he transformed like the energy of the room and also contributed in a really beautiful way. And so often we, especially in American culture, it's very much like this is professionalism, and then on this side, and then you have your personal life, and they never intermix. And so here was this place where they had intermixed, and it was a really beautiful picture of what life can look like when we allow space for our children to be part of our creative practice. So anyway, at that conference there was this poet, and she gave a piece. She spoke out loud one of her pieces, and then I really enjoyed it. So I went up to her after, and I was asking her about just her poetry and her life. And she had 2 grown-up children. And I said, well, when did you start writing poetry? And she said that she didn't write till she was until later in life. And I said, oh, did you develop the passion for it later in life? And she said, oh, no, I had always loved to write, but I chose not to write when my children were young because I didn't want to resent them that when they got in the way of my work. And that stung so much. And she was very lovely, very well spoken and intelligent. It wasn't anything against her, but it was all of a sudden, like you said, that guilt just pricked me, because I can't tell you how many times as someone pursuing creative outlets, I have resented my children waking up early from a nap, not choosing to take a nap. I can't get them to bed at night. Somebody's up all night long, so I'm exhausted the next day. There's there are all these little pockets of time that went through my head thinking how I had resented my children or how they had known that I was frustrated with them because I was in the middle of something and they interrupted. And I left that space feeling that guilt. And then I went home to my friend's house in Colorado. She lived about an hour from our conference and she had like a large mound of laundry to do. And she's an artist and she does a lot of work in Pueblo, Colorado. And so she gets commissions and things. So she didn't have time that week to do her family laundry. She's got three littles at home. So she had this mound and I start helping her fold it. And she just says, like, I just have ignored my housework all week. And she has this guilt over it. And I thought, well, that's how I often feel too. Like before I came to this conference, I had to spend like a day scrubbing my house because like most moms, I think, spend nap time cleaning. Well, I spend it writing. And so my poor little house gets pretty shoddy sometimes. I don't have a cleaning lady coming in daily, which would be really nice.
Who does?
I know someone out there does, and
Yeah.
I resent that, but so just full of resentment. So anyway, she and I are folding her laundry, and then she tells me her little daughter brings her up this picture that she had done, and she's like just so proud of it. The daughter's proud of it. She's proud of it. It's this beautiful moment. And then a few minutes later, she's telling me how Georgia O Keefe used to be her hero until she realized that Georgia O Keefe chose not to have children. And for her, it was just this stab. And she's like, my hero didn't want children. And here I am, like a mother of 5, and I love children. And so it kind of like for her, like split, she kind of had this split from Georgia. So I went home, I started researching Georgia's life and realized she was this, very modern woman in a time she was in the 1920s pursuing her art. And it was really frowned on to try to be a mother and an artist because she had to go to these exhibits and display her work, and she just felt like if she brought children along, people would not have taken her seriously when already she was struggling to be taken seriously. Like she had done these beautiful renderings of flowers, and then everyone was trying to tell her that they were sexual images, and she's like, no, I don't want to be sexualized just because I'm a woman artist. I want to be seen from my expression, right? I don't need you to like put a label on it. So she already felt like she couldn't be taken seriously because she was a woman. There's a quote in her biography where another artist friend in school with her says, well, you're going to be an art teacher and I'm going to be an artist, right? Because he was a male and felt like she wasn't going to get to be an artist because there weren't any famous women artists at the time. So she chose to not have children and pursue her career. And then there's a split with her husband where she goes off to New Mexico and he's in New York. He's an art curator there. And so she spends less and less time with him. And she says she has a really difficult time balancing marriage and art. So she didn't have children, but she still even had that push and pull of, giving, how much time do I give to my art? How much time do I give to my husband in that life in New York? So it's just interesting to me, the choices and how this all played out. But in my post, so anyway, I go home, I research about her, and I just felt this draw, and I wrote this essay. Like sometimes you write something and it takes a couple drafts, and I just feel like it just flowed out of me. Like what ended up on paper is almost exactly what came out of me. That it was like a one take wonder. Not that it's a wonder, but
It's a wonder. Let's just call it what it is.
I got it down on paper because it just was there. I think for so many years, I must have harbored this piece in my head. And I got it down and then submitted it and they accepted it. And I have had women reach out to me and say, wow, like that is exactly how I feel as an artist, that I'm trying to balance life with my children and my husband. And then I also, if I'm not creating, I'm bitter. If I'm creating, then I'm resentful because there's not, and where is that balance? And so that I think is what we're all in pursuit of.
Yeah. So do you think that like the conclusion of your article, which I will share in the show notes so people can read it, but was it that there's that tension? Is like there is the tension always between being the creative person and also having a family? Was that the takeaway from you, what you had?
Yeah, but I do end the piece saying like, yes, I understand why Georgia chose not to have children. I don't like it doesn't discount who she is as an artist to me. In fact, I think it's lovely that she's known really as the mother of American modernism. So she was a mother in her own right. But I did end it saying, what if she had had a child and that child had sat in her lap, right, and had drawn a smudge on the paper, but it was like imprinted in her heart, like that she's passing on this love of art to her child, and just that there is beauty in that. And I talked a lot in the article too about how my children are the fodder for my work. Like I started writing maybe 7, 8 years ago, and I know that I am a stronger, better writer because my life is so much more complicated with a family than I think it would have been as a single woman. Like,
I
I have
have
just had so much more.
I have thought that too. Like I have I have my master's degree in British literature. And
Oh,
that was my focus, so like of my thesis. And so I thought like, you know how sometimes your brain goes to different timelines. Like, what if my timeline had gone in this direction and I had like gotten the doctorate and worked at the university and I hadn't had 5 children? Like, what would my life look like then? Like, would I be writing, like would I have novels published? Would I have like academic papers published? Like all these things that I haven't done. But then I've probably written over 700 like blog posts, not even counting like articles that I've had published in the world. And I'm like, that's a lot of writing that I've done based on my family and based on like my own inner life, like my spiritual life or like my emotional health or like mental health, things that I'm working through with my children and myself and like how much my children have grown me and changed me and provided the food for which like or the ground from which like all this writing springs. And so I think, in the timeline that I am in, like of course my creative life springs from my children because they are my life.
that's exactly how I feel. Yes. And you said that so beautifully. Like they test you and grow you. And I even remember getting married and thinking I was a pretty nice person. And then I got married and thought, I am wicked and terrible. I am selfish. And how that I have had to really wrestle with that now. I've been married for about 14 years and we have 3 kids. And yeah, it's just constantly growing and testing you, and you really, everything that happens in your life, if you're an artist, can inspire your art. And so it's looking at it through that lens and having gratitude for the hard moments or the hard days and the in the seasons, because they really, like, they do make you dig down deep, and they should, from that deep place, you should have seeds of new work springing forth. So
Mhm. Yeah, I've, in my other alternative universes, because, as creative people, we're always like, our imaginations are always going crazy. I've thought like, okay, someday when I'm in my imaginary classroom of all my creative writing students, because someday I'll be there, right? Right.
yes.
And I think all of my life experience has informed my writing. And I would not have been able, as like a mid-20s, if I had graduated with my MFA or whatever, teaching creative writing, I would not be able to teach from a place of like wisdom and depth and like emotional anguish or choice or like sacrifice that I could now as a woman in my 40s, like having gone through all of my life experiences and relationships and choices. Like I could not have been that person. And so I think like your life informs your creativity,
Yes.
but somehow it's so hard to like embrace what that creativity looks like in the daily because
Yes.
there
Yeah.
are so many things that push and pull us away from it, including ourselves. And so I think that's what's so hard is embracing both like the family responsibility, but also this like need to be ourselves and need to be the creative person.
Yes. My friend said, the same friend I went to the conference with said once, the laundry will always be there, but the hour to be creative will not. And I love that. So sometimes I do have to remember, like when my house is messy and I'm looking out at the sea of things to do, that, like, yes, it will still, like, if I take this hour right now to sit down and write, like, that will mean more, and I will have more gain from that than if the dishes get done. So it is trying to find the time for it, and knowing how much of an important task, not task is the wrong word, but an important part of your life, where, like, if I choose to do the dishes, then I think I harbor resentment right later on in the day. Like, well, I haven't had any time to myself today. Or, and another thing about being, I think, in that creative space is sometimes we tend to be introverted. And so then having all of these little people and needing us and wanting us all day long can be hard, where I think sometimes in my fantasy, I'm just like hiding in my closet and writing. So it's finding it. There is no perfect balance. That's what I found. There's no perfect balance between taking the time or not taking the time, because either way, something is always going to suffer. And we have to, like, adjust our mindset of, like, okay, I don't want the word to be suffer even in my head. Like, I need to know, like, everything is fodder for my work, right? But then it's still like finding the time when I can, so that it doesn't feel like I've given my whole self to my family or given everything to my art, and that yeah, it's that push pull. I think I'm just repeating myself over and over, but
No, I understand.
it's difficult.
I know, like, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, the real push was on like work-life balance. And I was blogging then, and people were writing about it, work-life balance, or like, oh, what was the catchphrase? Lean in, that whole thing. And then people are like, lean out, like
Yeah.
but so those trends like come and go. And I remember thinking I was working then, I was teaching, and I had 4 little kids, and I was trying to do all these like get published and get that momentum going. And that was hard. Like getting yourself out there for the first time was just hard. And
Yeah.
so I kept thinking about balance all the time, and there was just no balance. It was just like
None.
chaos.
Yeah.
And then I really thought about the idea of like, what is my priority today? And I think that that made more sense to me. Is is my priority, okay, nobody had pants this morning and everybody had a meltdown, including me. So like the priority needs to be like washing laundry so people have pants, Like
Yes.
that's the priority. But maybe later in the day, instead of folding the laundry, because you can just pull it out of the basket if they're clean, the priority is writing or creating art or whatever your medium is. Like that is the priority because that's what's going to feed your soul. So it's like, or what's going to feed the little bodies in your house. You have to make lunch, you have to make dinner, these
Yes.
things
Yeah.
that you've committed to as a caretaker and as a mother. That's the priority for the moment. But later, you stay up 2 hours past your bedtime and you read, and that's what fills you up. So I think
Hmm.
that just like instead of trying to find this like mythical balance of like, I spent enough time with my children and enough time in self-care and enough time with my work and enough time with the husband, like it, I don't even know. Everything is just out of whack all the time.
Yes. And I need 36 hours in the day. Hello.
Yes. I think
Yeah.
like
I could
just
really use.
focusing on that priority for the day or even just like for the next 5 minutes helps me just mentally wrap my head around the things I wanted to do with my life.
That's so good. Yeah. That it's just important to, like, be able to look at it as, like, I am a caretaker. That is my number one priority and responsibility. And my art will come, but I will make sure that, my kids are fed and like loved and doted on. But I think that guilt as a caretaker, when we want to do our very best with our children, is, but then they're going to know that I was ignoring them for this time, or that I was a little resentful or a little short with them if they came to me when I was in the middle of my art. And I have had to work through that. And a friend of mine, who's also a writer, said, isn't it the most beautiful gift that we are showing them that we are going to, like, create something beautiful with our lives, or that we're doing like, we have this beautiful purpose, and they get to see their mother living out her passions. And then you're giving them this example of what they could be when they grow up. Like, look, your mommy, like, is brave, and your mommy like, is adventurous and wants to create these things, and how it's really should be an inspiration for them. And so I've really tried to like understand that as I'm working too. Like, okay, like I have poured into you all morning long. We've read, we've done all these beautiful things together. Like now mommy's going to take some time and do this thing. And you can self-play. Like it is quite, you are quite capable of playing with blocks in your room. And so I think it does, you know, if you establish that line of communication with them and you set a tone, um, that everybody does sometimes fall into place.
Yeah. I think, like I said, making yourself a priority. And I think
Yeah.
giving ourselves permission to do that, I think is so important. And that is the brave step, is the permission to be like, it's okay for me to take time for myself. It's okay for me to pursue the things I love. And ultimately, like the result is you are happier and more fulfilled, and your kids do see that you are a real person and not just their mom.
Yes, yes, that you are. Yes, I love that line, that you are a real person and not just their mom. Yeah, and it's been so sweet over the years. Like when I was first starting out and I really wanted this little story I'd written to get published, and I worked on it for like a year and I poured everything into it. And my little 4-year-old self-published it for me. He's like, see, mom, it's easy to publish a book. And he drew all the pictures for it and he stapled it.
That's so
And
sweet.
right, it was like he was believing along with me for my dream. And it was just, I don't know, the sweetest things have come from pursuing art with kids. Things I can't imagine not having. And so yes, to the poet who told me at the conference she didn't pursue her poetry till she was grown. Like I wonder, what if she had just sat at the table and written poetry every day with her little children and they got better at hearing rhythm and rhyme and imagery and all of these things because she was sharing her work with them and they were helping her create. Like the book that I worked on with my friend a few years ago that we were at the conference for, like I wrote that for my kids as a silly ditty when we were sitting there, and then my son helped me strengthen the lines. And it's like, and I think he's a better writer because he's heard me struggle over the years and helped me edit. And if I hadn't been creating when he was little, like there would have been that void or that absence of. So I do think that our kids can make us, it's not even that they're fodder for our work, but they can make us better at our our creative process too. And then we're giving them an example to, you know, that of what it looks like to intermingle it in your life,
Yeah.
regardless of what's going on. Life is always going to be chaotic and busy, but like, do we make space for the things that are our passions, our hobbies?
Yeah. I think that that writer was operating in like an either or mindset. Either I write or I am a good mother. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that it's so much more life-giving to have like a both and. I can be both a mother and an artist. And that doesn't mean it's not hard, because maybe the growth is not in the art, but it's in managing our resentment towards those that we love. That's like the real growth that we have to push through. And that's the hard part, because there is time where you want to create or write or draw or sculpt or whatever your medium is, and you can't.
Yes.
You want to go to the conference and you can't because you're breastfeeding, or because you have a 3-year-old who can't go to sleep without you, or your husband is overwhelmed at work and you just cannot leave. Like, there are times that you can't do things because you have kids, but then there are times that you can, and those seasons come back again. So I think viewing it as a both and not an either or, I think normalizes the struggle, but also just acknowledges that it's hard.
Yes, yes. And it doesn't even have to be either or and or. It can also be learning to incorporate into, right?
Hmm.
Like I have had, I mean, the breastfeeding baby came with me to the conference,
Mhm.
or like maybe I don't get to type on my laptop that day because the baby's going to pound on the keys, but I can take an old fashioned piece of paper and pencil and he will scribble alongside me, like finding creative solutions, um, so that your kids are, yeah, inspired by you being more than just the tidier of lunch and the floor sweeper. And, you know, they're getting to see. Yeah, more than that.
I was actually looking through, I like to record my books. Everybody's like, "Are you on Goodreads?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not." I'm like, I tried and then I just like left it off. So I have an account, but for years I have recorded books just like in a Word document. And now I like take a picture on my phone of the book or of the audiobook. And so I was just writing down all the books I had read this year because I was like, I've read a lot of books this year. For me.
Yeah.
Let's just like not, I've read like 30 books this year. It's not a
That's
ton.
good. That's it. That's a respectable number.
So I was writing them down, and then I have this document that I've kept since 2011. And so I was looking at all the books I had read since 2011, and I wanted to count them all up. So I was scrolling through each year, and I realized that 2012 and 2013 were completely missing. So I went from like, no, it was some year in there. Like there were 2 years I had no books and no years recorded. And I'm like, I had a new baby that year. I was working. Like there were a lot of things going on. And then did I read any books? Who knows? Like I have no memory of that and I didn't record
Mhm.
it. But, in 2014, I did read like 9 books. So like I got back to it again
Yeah,
after that period of time. So
yeah.
even if we think, oh my gosh, I haven't written in 5 years, I haven't written since I had my youngest, or I haven't picked up a paintbrush in like forever, like, but if that thing brought you joy in the past, it's not too late to pick it up again and just be like, it's okay that I'm rusty, or I'm practicing, or I'm getting back into it. Like, that's good if it feeds your soul.
That's funny you say that because Georgia O'Keefe, I was reading up on her today, and she had two periods of her life where she took 2 or 3 years off. It was more of a depression thing, than anything, but it's, we do blame like our children are like, oh, I'm in this new season of motherhood, but no matter what, like life to everybody everywhere throws hard or different seasons, right? So it's just normal, I think, to have seasons and pockets of time where you can't devote what you want to your work, or that you go so long that you do become very rusty, and that's
Hmm.
okay too. And you're starting something new, and to honor that space is really important.
Yeah. Or you just create for yourself. Because I think sometimes we think, okay, if I'm going to create art, it has to be perfect. It has to be like publisher worthy, or it has to be like the craft show worthy, or it has to be like my piano playing has to be worthy of the, the recital or whatever the value was we had when we were younger. And it just doesn't have to be that way. Like I was playing the piano. We moved recently, so we got our piano set up again. I really need to have it tuned. But I was playing it and our front door was open and our neighbor came by and she was like, "You're so good." And I like immediately was like, "I am not good," because to myself, I sounded terrible. Because I was just like fumbling around, fumbling through. But the piece I was playing was like pretty complicated. And I'm like, to her, she was hearing it like, that
Yeah.
sounds really good. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I like stuttered and stuttered and stuttered. And finally, I was just like, thank you. And so I realized like, you don't have to make excuses to be like, I'm terrible, or it's been so long, or like, this is just a
Yes.
silly thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay just to be like, this is for me, or to say thank you to the person who gives you the compliment. Like, there's no value we don't need to monetize our joy. Or we don't have to
Mm,
like have to sell it to somebody, whether that's metaphorical or literal, for us to have
yes.
art to be a joy in our lives.
Yes. And you always get better at it the more you practice, right? I have so many novels that are never going to be published that really should never be seen. But it was the practice of writing them. And when I look back, I think like in the moment, I hoped to monetize this. Like I will just be really frank and honest. Like that was probably my goal as I wrote it. But it taught me so much, and yes, it brought me joy, and I loved the process, and I learned so much through it. And that is so important too in art, is to not see it like you said as a monetization, but just always as a means of growth and enjoyment and fulfillment. um and also writing has brought me the richest community. Like everyone says writing is such a lone practice. It is not. Like I have this beautiful women's group that comes to my house every Thursday, and we've done this now for over a year and a half. Um, and we start at 10 a.m. and we always chit chat till like 10:30, and no one leaves before like 1:30 or 2. And we go around the table and everyone reads out loud what they're working on that week and we give feedback. And everyone brings in snacks, and we've become so involved in each other's lives. And I can't imagine my life without this community. It has enriched it so much. So yes, your passion, whatever it is, can also bring you this like lovely little community that you know, even if it's just online, like it just brings camaraderie, and there's something so sweet about exploring those hobbies and passions that are in your heart.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea of like in-person community. And I have found so much community through my writing online. So like there are just ways you can find community. Since we have moved, I have been thinking about community a lot because I'm like, I need to rebuild my community. And I'm taking an art class, like a watercolor class on Wednesday. And I kept telling my husband, I was like, well, I already paid for this class. And then I'm like, I'm supposed to take this class on Wednesday. And he's working a swing shift this week. And so he's not going to be here for like bedtime. So I'm going to be telling my kids. And I have older kids, but they're like as feral as the little ones. So I'm like, like I have like 16-year-old twins. They are not little. And they should be able to babysit, but I worry about them the most. I'm like, please don't beat up anybody while I'm gone. But so this art class is like from 6:30 to 8:30, and I'm like, duh, it's right near bedtime. I'm gonna have to feed everybody before I leave. And like I keep making excuses in my head about why it's not gonna work when I should just be like, it's gonna work, and I'm just gonna go do the thing and it's gonna be fun. And it's just a one time, it's a one-off. It's not every week, it's one day for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I keep trying to explain it away in my head, even though I've already paid for it. It's not like so I think that I struggle with this so much of just like explaining away my need to get out and do these things that feed my soul.
Yeah.
So I am going to do it. I'm going to do the class, and maybe I'll post a picture online of whatever I make when we air this episode. But like it's hard. It really is just hard to like mentally do the things we love when we're moms because we have a lot on our plates.
Yeah. Yeah. It is really hard. And it is too, I think we look a lot at single people and think, well, that must be nice. You have all the time to create. Like that woman in the watercolor class with you who's gonna like show up 15 minutes early in a like the most beautifully like pressed dress that you're like, wow, you either have the money to like go to the the dry
The dry
cleaner,
cleaner.
or you had 30 minutes to iron that and you look really great. Like,
She'll have her hair like curled, and I'm gonna be like, no makeup, messy bun. Like, I'm here. I'll have spaghetti like on my front.
yes. And we're like so proud of it. We're probably like 10, like I was almost late to talk to you because I had to help my daughter. They were in hybrid school, so I had to help her with her phonograms right before I came on. And it's like we're always just right trying to do everything and be juggling everything. And it's just chaos. These years are chaos. But yeah, we're just trying to find our way through them.
Yes, that is find our way through them and just find ourselves through them. I think remain
Yes. Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not forgetting who we are, or we don't always know who we are when we become mothers, but I think it really does bring out it, you know, it really digs us down deep and gives us more roots and springs forth new life in so many, like metaphorically, but it just teaches us so much that I think we often find new mediums to and new hobbies through it that we didn't know about. Which we're just so much more complex than we knew, right? And
Mhm.
there's seasons of life, like I mean, even not to keep going back to Georgia, but like she even I love this thing she says where she did take a lot of nude pictures with her husband when he was a photographer and he took all these photos of her. And she said when she got to her old age in her 70s, she looked back at those photos and said she didn't even know that woman. Like because life is so like wonderfully complex. Like we are always growing and changing and evolving. Like yes, like of course who she probably was in her 70s was so different than who she was in her 20s. And that's how motherhood is, right? Like
Mhm.
who I am before I am a mother is so different than who I am now. I just think that's an exciting part of being human is that we're always growing and changing.
Yes, I love that. Well, I have these little questions I like to ask at the end, and I feel like all of them you could answer, so I'm trying to pick the best one. But I'm going to ask this one. What is saving your life right now? If you're like, I didn't do this. This is bringing me life. This is saving my life in all the chaos.
Yeah, so I just took some contracted work to work with some roofing companies. That's not saving my life. I'm like, oh,
Like, wow, tell us more.
I love. So that's not. But on the side, I have this really exciting project that I'm working on that I'm not allowed to talk about. But I got to go on Friday to an archive in a university and go through like all of these old letters and newspaper articles. And it was so cool. And then tomorrow I'm going to go down to the botanical garden where we are and learn how they press plants for this piece I'm doing. And so there's just so much life that's coming out of that. So I would say that project is like, right, I have like my freelancing where I have to like, where it's like for a paycheck, but then getting to have this creative avenue has been really fun. I just started this like 2 weeks ago. So I probably have like a couple months of this being like my all encompassing project. So
That sounds really cool. Like, I would love to spend and like read old articles and newspapers, especially if you're like trying to piece together a story or like find
oh
out
yeah.
something. Like, that's really exciting.
If
I
you
think
can
that
ever
goes really well.
find, if you can ever just find a story that like hasn't been really published yet, but you find it and you're like, that is so interesting.
Hmm.
That is like the number one key to like you might have the makings of a book, of a
Hmm.
novel or something. And then I never knew how easy it was. I started doing historical kind of work fiction and stuff maybe a few years ago. And before that, I didn't really know how to research, but like archivists, librarians, all of them, they are like eager and excited to help. And they're just a fun bunch. So
Yes. They're like nerding out with you. They're like, yes, I have a letter and an article. I can show you like 15 of them.
yeah, it's so fun. So you have to go in there and be really careful with everything. And it's just so fun to see, like, read old letters and know, like, this was the form of communication people used on the daily. And they just spoke very eloquently compared to us nowadays. But
Yeah,
that's a whole other topic.
that's really cool. I hope your project goes really well. Where
Thank
can
you. I
we,
hope so.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just said I hope like I can share more about it later.
Yes.
That it
Where
goes.
can we find you online?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram the most at KrisAnn Valdez Writes, and that's probably the main one. I also didn't have a phone for a couple weeks, and it was really like life-giving for me. So I'm trying to like find that balance too.
Yes.
So
The priority. Is my priority Instagram today? Maybe so.
yeah, I'm like
Maybe
maybe
not.
I don't know how to post a reel. I just posted my first one. That well, I posted a couple, but this is the first one I like tried to do like editing and stuff. And I was like, this is soul sucking. But maybe if I try to do it like once a week for the algorithm, I don't know. There's like this whole other world online, right? That's just I don't even. It's like this bear that I don't really want to tackle or hunt.
I hear you on that. Yes, I understand that struggle very well. So, well, I'll make sure to share your Instagram handle and people can follow your writing from there. Thank you so
Oh,
much
thank
for
you,
coming
Brittany.
on.
I
I love
loved being here. I really enjoyed this.
and me too. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Motherhood Metamorphosis. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to this channel so you never miss an episode. Next, tell your friends. Podcasts are a slow growth type of social media, so promo works best when it's from person to person. If you know another mom who's in the goop right now, send her a text of encouragement and the link to the episode that is speaking to your heart right now. If you have a story about your own matrescence, the physical, emotional, hormonal, and social transition that occurs when someone becomes a mother, please leave a comment below. I want this channel to be a place where women can build community about the challenges and joys of their own motherhood metamorphosis. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope it encouraged you and gave you some good food for thought. If you ever have any questions, comments, or you'd like to reach out to me personally, you can email me at brittanyaming@gmail.com.